Good morning, beautiful children. Actually, I'm reading this um, last night and looking out my window, and it is snowing, snowing, snowing. How can this possibly be spring? Ah! In any event, let's get to it. The last time we read a chapter from Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, we read about the rats, and the chapter was called The Toy Tinkerer. And the Toy Tinkerer is a man who they found in the woods after they left the Boniface estate. They found this man in the woods, and he had passed away from a heart attack or something, but they found that he left them lots and lots of treasures, electronic type treasures. So we're going to find out what they might be doing with these treasures and how this might all have led them to be on the Fitzgibbon farm. So here we go. Thorn Valley. It might almost be easier to tell what wasn't in it, Nicodemus said, talking about the truck. That truck was as roomy as a small bus, and the old man hadn't wasted a square foot of it. Not that it was cluttered. On the contrary, everything was neatly in place on the shelf or a hook, or in its correct cabinet. It took us a while to understand what a treasure that we had found. The truck contained, as you might expect, a big stock of toys. It also contained the old man's simple living quarters, a cot, a lamp, a work table, a folding chair, a bucket for carrying water, a plate, pots, pans, and so on and so on. There was a tiny refrigerator with food in it, and some canned stuff, peas, beans, peaches, things like that. Most of the toys we thought at first that we had no particular use for. What would we need them for? There were toy automobiles and trucks, windmills and merry-go-rounds, airplanes, boats, and lots of other things. Mostly they all ran on batteries. It was entertaining to look at them, and some of them we even tried out. For a while the floor looked like Christmas morning, with toys spread out everywhere. We tired of that and explored farther into the truck. Up near the front we found several large cardboard boxes, and when we opened them we found that they were full of electric motors of all assorted sizes, replacement engines or broken down or worn out toys. There were dozens of them, ranging from the very small, no bigger than a spool of thread, up to some very heavy ones that we could hardly move. And then next to these we found the real treasure, the old man's tools. They were neatly arranged in shining rows inside a steel cabinet as big as a big trunk. There were screwdrivers, saws, hammers, clamps, vices, wrenches, pliers, why, everything you could imagine. There were welding tools, soldering irons, and electric drills, and the beauty of it was, since they were designed for working on toys, they were nearly all miniature, easily small enough for us to handle, yet they themselves, not toys, they were made out of the finest tempered steel, like the tools of a watchmaker or a dentist. It was Arthur who said it first. Do you realize what we've got here? Why, we could open up our own machine shop. With these tools and all these motors, why, we could make anything that we wanted. Oh my, we could, said Jenner, except we've forgotten one thing. What's that? We have no electricity. The old man couldn't have run these tools off batteries. The small toy motors, yes, but not the real ones, not the power tools. He had to plug into the house current somewhere. See, there's the extension cord on the wall. There was a very long coil of heavy black cable hanging from a hook on the wall. It had a plug on one end and a socket on the other. Now another rat spoke up, a rat named Sullivan. He was a great friend of Arthur's, and like him, he had a particular interest in engines and electricity. Maybe, said Sullivan, maybe we could plug it into a house current. What do you guys think? Well, how could we do that? I said. Who is going to let us walk into their house and plug in our cable? Well, said Sullivan, do you remember the cave that we looked at the other day? The one we've decided was too close to the farmhouse? That was the beginning of it. The end you have seen yourself. He was speaking of the cave that you saw today. We all trooped back to it and examined it more carefully. It was too close, or at least it was too close, or at least closer than we had planned to live to human habitation. But then we saw the huge rose bush near the tractor shed, where with quite a lot of digging we could put a concealed entrance. But most important, we noticed that there was an electric light in the tractor shed. Mr. Fitzgibbon had an underground power cable leading out from his house to the shed. We dug a tunnel to it, tapped it, and we had all the electricity that we would possibly need. We found a water pipe as well, and we tapped that too, and we had running water. Then, a few at a time, we moved the tools from the motor from the toy tinkerer truck into the cave. We got nearly all of them before the truck disappeared. We went back one day, and it was gone. Only the hole remained where its tire had been sunk. The forest rangers must have found it and hauled it away, but they never discovered or disturbed the mound where the old man was buried. So we built ourselves the life that you see around you. Our colony thrived and grew to 115. We taught our children to read and write. We had plenty to eat, running water and electricity, a fan to draw in fresh air, an elevator, a refrigerator. Why, deep underground, our home stayed warm in the winter and cool in the summer. It was comfortable, almost luxurious. And yet, all was not well. After the first burst of energy, the moving in of the machines, the digging of the tunnels and the rooms, after that was done, a feeling of discontent came upon us, something like a creeping disease. We were reluctant to admit it at first. We tried to ignore the feeling or to fight it off by building more things, bigger rooms, fancier furniture, carpeted hallways, things that we did not really need. It was it I was reminded of a story that I had read at the Boniface estate when I was looking for things written about rats. It was about a woman in a small town who bought a vacuum cleaner. Her name was Mrs. Jones, and up until then she, like all of her neighbors, had kept her house spotlessly clean by using a broom and a mop. But the vacuum cleaner did a faster and better job, and soon Mrs. Jones was the envy of all the other housewives in town, so they too bought vacuum cleaners. The vacuum cleaner business was so brisk, in fact, that the company that made them opened a branch factory in the town. The factory used lots of electricity, of course, and so did the women with the vacuum cleaners, so the local electric power had to put up a new big plant to keep everything running. In its furnaces the power plant burned coal, and out of its chimney black smoke poured day in, day out, blanketing the town with soot and making all the floors dirtier than ever. Still, by working twice as hard and twice as long, the women of the town were able to keep their floors almost as clean as they had before. Mrs. Jones, that was before Mrs. Jones ever bought a vacuum cleaner in the very first place. Now, the story was part of a book of essays, and the reason I had read it so eagerly was that it was called The Rat Race, which I learned means a race where no matter how fast you run, you don't get anywhere. But there was nothing in the book about rats, and I felt bad about that title because I thought it wasn't a rat race at all. It was a people race, and no sensible rat would ever do such a foolish thing. And yet, here we were, rats getting caught up in something a lot like the people race, and for no good reason. And the worst thing was that even with our make work projects, we didn't really have enough to do. Our life was just too easy. I thought of what the scientists had written about the prairie dog ancestors, and I began to worry. So were many of the others. We called a meeting, indeed, a whole series of meetings, extending over more than a year. We talked and we argued and considered, and we remembered our evenings in the library at the Boniface estate when we had wondered what a rat civilization would look like. Oddly enough, Jenner, my old and best friend, took little part in these discussions. He remained rather glumly silent and seemed very disinterested, but most of the others felt as I did, and slowly something became clear. We saw our problems, and we figured out, as well as we could, what to do about them. First, we realized that finding the toy tinkerer's truck, which had seemed like such an enormous stroke of luck, had in fact led us to the very trap that we should now avoid. As a result, we were now stealing more than ever before, not only food, but electricity and water. Even the air we breathed was drawn in by a stolen fan, run by a stolen current. It was this, of course, that made our life so easy that our lives began to seem pointless. We did not have enough work to do because the thief's life is always based on somebody else's work. Second, there was always the fear in the back of all of our minds that we might get caught, or perhaps not caught. We took precautions against that, so much as found out. Mr. Fitzgibbon was surely aware that some of his crops were being removed, and as our group grew larger, we would have to take more and more of his crops. Already he had begun lining some of his grain bins with a steel metal sheet. That didn't bother us, though, because we knew how to get the door open. But suppose he should take to locking them up? Well, I guess we could cut the locks, of course, or even we could cut through the sheets of metal wall. We have the tools for that. But it would be a dead giveaway. What would Mr. Fitzgibbon think about rats who could cut through metal? All these things we worried about and talked about and puzzled over, but we could not find any easy answer because there was no easy answer. There was, however, a hard answer. I began taking long walks into the forest. I had an idea in the back of my mind. Sometimes I went alone, sometimes with some others. On one particular day I went with Jenner. I had not yet told him about my idea, nor did I on the morning that we set out, but merely proposed a direction. We took enough food along with us for lunch. I remember that it was autumn. It was a bright, cool day, and the leaves were rustling around as the wind blew them, and some were even turning yellow and red. And in my walks I had been exploring the jeep trails, trying to find out where they went and where they didn't go, trying to find out the wildest parts of the forest, places where not even the rangers had ever gone. A few times I tried asking for information. I asked 2 squirrels, for instance, if they knew what lay on the other side of the mountain that rose before me, but they were silly, fearful creatures, and after looking at me in surprise, they both scurried up into an oak tree and scolded each other senselessly in loud voices, shaking their tails at us until I left. I asked some chipmunks, and they were more polite. They couldn't answer my question, never having been farther than 100 yards from where they were born, but advised me to ask the birds, more specifically one bird, a very old bird, who was famous throughout the forest. They even told me how to find the enormous tree in which he lived. That was the beginning of my acquaintance with the owl. He knew every tree, every trail, every stone in the forest. He was, as you know, not naturally friendly toward rats or mice either, but when I told him about our life in NIMH and how our escape was, he grew interested, though he did not say so. I think he had already been watching some of our activities from the air in the evenings. Anyway, he was curious and listened carefully when I told him about our problem and my ideas for solving them. I have talked to him many, many times since. It was he who told me about Thorn Valley. The valley lies deep in the forest beyond the big tree. The jeep trails do not cross it, nor even come close to it, for the mountains around it are forbidding, too steep and rocky even for jeeps, and it is covered with thorny thickness. The owl told me that in all the years he had been flying, he had never once seen a human being near it. Yet the bottom of the valley is level and broad and nearly a mile long. Steep cliff walls in it surround it all around. There are 3 ponds or small lakes in it, and apparently these are fed by spring, for they never dry up. On clear days, the owl said, he sometimes saw small fish swimming in them. I thought, could rats weave fish nets to make fish hooks? I don't know. It was this valley that I was looking for the day that I set out with Jenner. I had careful directions from the owl, yet it took us half a day moving briskly to reach the base of the mountain. then up very steeply for more than an hour. Not really difficult for us, since rats are better climbers than men. Also, we're shorter, so we had little trouble with the spiny underbush. From the top of the high ridge, at last we looked down, and the valley lay before us. Oh my, it was a beautiful valley, still, a wild and lonely place. Through the green and yellow treetops below us, I could see the water of one of the ponds sparkling in the sun. I got the idea that our eyes, were the first to ever see this wondrous spot. Yet that was not true, for as we descended into the valley, a deer suddenly appeared in the trees ahead and went bounding off down the slope. There were wild animals there, and I wondered if they even suspected that outside these walls of mountains there were cities and roads and people everywhere. Now, most of the valley floor was in forest, great spreading oak and maple trees, but near one of the ponds I saw was what I'd hoped to find, a large natural clearing, a glade where only grass and wild flowers grew, and some clumps of black raspberry bushes. The clearing was on the far side of the valley. Beyond it was the mountain, and it rose tall up against and steep. A steep slope with the big outcroppings. Oh, let me read that again. Let me try that again. The clearing was on the far side of the valley. Beyond it, the mountain wall rose again, a steep slope with big outcroppings of stone, granite, ledges that thrust 6 or 7 or 10 feet out of the earth. We could live there, I said to Jenner. Well, I suppose we could, he said. It is a beautiful place, but it's a long way from the barn. Think how far we'd have to carry food, and no electricity. Well, I said, we could grow our own food. Maybe someday, maybe someday we would get electricity if we decided we really wanted it. We don't know how. Anyway, where would we grow our food? Well, right here. It would be easy to clear away those weeds and brushes, and if we dug into the mountainside under those rock ledges, why, we'd have all the cave space we wanted, dry and warm, with a good roof. There could be room enough for 1,000 of us. There aren't 1,000 of us. Well, there might be some day. But why? Why move? Said Jenner. We've got a better place to live right now. We've got all the food we want. We've got electricity and lights and running water. I can't understand why anybody or everybody that is talking about this, I can't understand them changing the way things are. Because, I said, everything we have is stolen. Nothing truly belongs to us. That's stealing. That is so silly. Is, is it stealing when farmers take milk from cows or eggs from chickens? Why, they're just smarter than the cows and chickens, that's all. Well, people are our cows. If we're smart enough, why shouldn't we get food from them? It's not the same, I said. Farmers feed the cows and chickens and take care of them. We don't do anything for what we take. Besides, if we keep it up, we're sure to be found out. What then? What if we are? People have been trying to exterminate rats for centuries, but they haven't succeeded, and we're smarter than the others. What are they going to do? Dynamite us? Let them try. We'll find out where they keep the dynamite and use it on them. Well, then we'd really be found out. Don't you see, Jenner? If we ever did anything like that, why, they'd figure out who we are and what we know. Then only 2 things could happen. Either they'd hunt us all down and kill us all, or they'd capture us and put us right back in to the laboratory or make us into a sideshow. And this time, if we were captured, we would never get away. I don't believe any of that, Jenner said. You've got this idea stuck in your head. We've got to start from nothing to work hard and build a rat civilization. I say, why start from nothing? If you can start with everything, we've got everything already that civilization has to offer. No, we haven't. I said, we're just living on the edge of somebody else's, like fleas on a dog's back. If the dog drowns, why, the fleas drown too. That was the beginning of an argument that never had a good ending. Jenner would not yield to my thinking, and I would not yield to his. It wasn't that he was lazy and that he didn't work hard. He was just more cynical than the rest of us. Stealing did not bother him, and he was a pessimist. He was not an optimist. He did not see the glass as half full. He never believed that we could really make it on our own. Maybe he was right. But I and most of the others felt that we must at least give it a try. If we fail, well, then I suppose we must come back here or find some other farm, or eventually forget all we've learned and go right back to stealing garbage. And so we began working out a plan, the plan. It has been a long time coming. 3 years ago, this spring, we started watching Mr. Fitzgibbon to learn what he did and how he did it, to bring food out of the earth. We collected books and magazines on farming. We discovered early that in order to stop stealing, we would for a while have to steal more than ever. We've laid up a 2-year food supply so that even if we don't succeed in growing a good crop the first year, we won't go hungry. We've got 2/3 of it moved now, and if, and we've dug a dry cave to store it in under one of the big rocks up on Thorn Valley. We've got seeds, we have our plows, we've cleared and cultivated part of the land near the pond, and in a few days we'll begin our first planting. Why, we've even dug some irrigation ditches in case there was a drought. We have a schedule worked out, sort of, a countdown, and by early June we will all be out of this cave and out of Mr. Fitzgibbon's barn, I hope forever. And that is the end of that. So, the rats do not want to take from Mr. Fitzgibbon. They want to be able to farm and to take care of themselves and to create their own. I'm wondering why that would be important to them. Why do they care? Because they could live on Fitzgibbon's farm for a long time and maybe not get found out. Why do you think to Nicodemus and the other rats that are going along with him in the plan, why do they think it's important to grow your own food, build your own houses, take care of your own things? What does that have to do with that story? Thinking about the story that they read earlier, that he was telling us about, the woman had a broom and a mop and her house was clean, but soon she got a vacuum cleaner, and then everybody had a vacuum cleaner, and then there was more time than ever, but their houses were dirtier than ever. I'm wondering what that has to do with the rats feeling like they have to grow their own food and take care of their own things. Just think about that, and if you have an answer, write it down, respond to it in the question, and we'll go from there. Tomorrow, we have a new chapter. It is called Captured. I wonder who is going to get captured. Have a wonderful night, morning, afternoon, children, and I will talk with you soon.